Y'all can be seated. Hello and welcome to the Peaceful Solution Character Education Certification class. We're going to continue today in the Workplace Manual. It's moral excellence in the workplace. And last week we started on chapter 4, which is, the topic is ask, more than just a 3-letter word. And I just wanted to briefly cover a few highlights for you from last week so that you might mark these if you didn't mark them, because they're important to remember. And the first one is on page 65, and it said the importance of asking for permission, instruction, or just to be 100% certain that we are taking the right course of action is part of being responsible, respectful, and is a great indicator that we are practicing self-control. It also reflects a humble attitude, and I underlined that and highlighted that. And because you'll find out that in the course of practicing asking, humility is really necessary. It's a very needed character trait. And then if you go down, that was in the first paragraph. If you go down to the second paragraph, the very last sentence says, making asking a focal point within this program has proven to be successful as a means of minimizing conflict in many situations. Okay, and that's one benefit right there. Okay, and then in the third paragraph, you can highlight cost. It's about 3 lines into the paragraph in the middle. Costly mistakes and cause. Well, the sentence says, when we do not take the time to ask, we can make costly mistakes and cause serious problems in our work areas. So that's a caution for us, and to warn, our students. Number one emphasizes to, as teachers of the Peaceful Solution, you're probably, taking this workplace manual to managers of businesses, employers of businesses, and educating them on it first. But then you might actually just be educating their employees too. So, you have to think about the different aspects of who you're going to be teaching in these lessons too. Okay? And then if we turn over to page 66, I highlighted the first sentence in the first paragraph there that says, asking promotes positive relationships among everyone we interact with on a daily basis. Okay, so that's another benefit, right? Really, if you think about it, who wouldn't like it if they're asked, and if you go and you ask your employer, can I do this, or can I help you, or if your employer even goes and asks the employees, do you need anything? Do you understand the instructions? It works both ways too. So, but it will promote positive relationships. And then in the second paragraph, this is still the same paragraph. But it's further down where it says, granted, not all conflicts can be avoided by asking first, but, and I highlighted this part, it can significantly reduce the occurrences by asking permission before touching, handling, or borrowing an item. Okay, so asking permission to use things is one of the major requirements in employment. You can't just go doing whatever you want with whatever you want, and this is going to make the employers and the employees have that positive relationship together. Okay, so we stopped there last week, and we're going to pick up in the second paragraph there, and I underline this first sentence here too. And it says, when we remember to ask permission first, we have an opportunity to show respect to the owner of the belonging. Okay, so here is another concept, showing respect to the owner. Okay, and the more we do this, the more, we've talked about this before, it will become a habit, right? And so when we form a habit of asking, we're going to develop something else, and that's a positive reputation, right? They always ask. They don't do these things without asking me first. They don't take my possessions. So you're going to have actually even an honest reputation, right? Because you're not just going to be known as someone who just goes and uses whatever they want in the workplace without without getting permission first, and that is very valuable too. So then continuing on here, it says, this also allows the individual to make choices concerning his or her possessions. And that's a concept that, isn't taught too much outside of the peaceful solution, that people, that rights of ownership that we read on the last page, that we have rights to what we own, and we have certain, I think it said back here, right, that people, what was that where it was? Oh, it'll come back to me. That we have the right to decide what gets done with our possessions. All right, so I did highlight that as well. And another benefit is this will prevent invading another's privacy, okay? So people value others who take the time to ask before touching. This helps to build a rapport that can enhance your work relationships as well as develop trusting and lasting friendships. And I remember going and taking the peaceful solution out different places and talking about it to people quite a few years back. And the example that we would give when we were talking about asking was, you wouldn't just let anybody take your keys to your car, and go use it, right? They'd have to ask. And most people, you wouldn't give permission to just go use your car. But when you ask people, wouldn't you like to be asked before someone takes your keys and uses your car? Well, absolutely. Absolutely. So, if they think asking is not a big deal, doesn't matter, we don't have to ask, because you might have some students like that too, that don't take it seriously and think, well, it's just a pen or it's just a this. Well, what if it was your child? What if it was your keys to your car and someone just decided to take them and go for a spin? You would not like that at all, right? And you could end up with a damaged car, or it might never come back too. So, we can use examples like that to emphasize to the students the importance of this, and they will start to see, oh yeah, that does make sense, because nobody wants to be stolen from, right? But I don't think most people realize in the workplace just using items without permission is a form of stealing. So that's important to get across to your students, all right? And forgive me if my voice is a little out today. So if you see me drinking water, that's so I can keep talking to you. So we're going to continue on here in the middle of this paragraph. People value others who take the time to ask before touching. This helps build a rapport that can enhance your work relationships, as well as develops trusting and lasting friendships. So not only will it be just a positive relationship, it can actually build friendships, which everybody needs friends, right? So that's another benefit. Say, I told you this chapter is full of the benefits of asking. We could call it that as a second title. And then in the next paragraph, it says, by the end of this chapter, you will learn that regardless of the circumstances, making asking a habit can become an important aspect and will greatly improve your daily life. And who doesn't want their daily life improved? You're not going to find anybody who disagrees with that. So, they might be skeptical, like I said, it's just asking, it's not that big of a deal. But tell them, give it a try, right? Just challenge your students to give it a try. Challenge the employers, challenge the supervisors. Just give it a try. Try asking. Encourage your employees to ask and see where it leads you. And they'll be pleasantly surprised, I'm sure. And I want to read to you the quote at the bottom here. We can put that up. Adopting a never hurts to ask attitude can prevent hurt, regret, loss of time, and embarrassment. Okay, so it can prevent a lot of things, right? And asking is going to help an employee keep their job. Here's another thing you could think about. It's going to help them keep their job, and as I said before, it's going to help them become trusted in their companies. Right? And they probably, if you're a trusted individual, you might be given more responsibilities. You might be given a higher position. You might be given a raise. you'll be deserving of those things. You can encourage the employees that way too, that, when we practice moral character traits of respect and asking, that is going to produce a very positive effect in their life. And the benefits are really endless. And the things that will change in their lives, they'll see them. And, on the flip side of that, if an employer would see, or a manager would see, someone going outside of the rules of that they've set about their possessions, then, excuse me just a second, then it's the employer's responsibility or the manager's responsibility to bring that to the attention of their employees. Not to let it slide, but to remind them of the rules and why they have them set in place. I mean, sometimes, the things that people do might take away the safety of others in the workplace. So, we have to be, teaching the managers. It's the managers and the employers' responsibility to teach their employees what they expect of them, and also to emulate that. If they want, this kind of behavior, the best way to show that is to do it themselves, to be that same kind of respectful, caring individual that they're desiring. And as their employees see that in them, they're going to want to please their employers, because they'll see how great it is to come to work. People, you can either just love coming to work, or you can dread it, right? And this is one way that employers and employees can make it a joy to come to work. All right, so we're going to move on. And I didn't mention before, but we are in procedure number 4, okay? So we're in the middle of procedure number 4. And we're going to jump up to the top of page 67, which says what we should ask for, okay? So here are some things. And we touched on this last week a little bit. One thing all workers ask for, right? I think I heard this one last week, a raise, okay? And another thing that was mentioned was, can I take my break? And, a very popular one that people ask for that I probably mentioned already today is, they ask for time off, right? They might ask for time off. So these are things that are also asking permission for something. They wouldn't just not show up one day and not say anything to their employer. They might not have a job to show up to the next day, right, if they did that. So it's very, you can show them some ways that they already know to ask, and that will make it not such a daunting thing, like, oh, this is a new concept to me, I never worried about it before. It's really not that hard, right? It's just building the habit and being mindful of our actions. So you can really encourage students with that. So in the first paragraph here, it says, there are countless things we can ask for. In the workplace, we can ask to borrow a coworker's pen to verify procedures in an effort to make sure steps are followed correctly, or for permission to take time off from work. And I highlighted these next 2 sentences. Asking brings unity into a work environment. Everyone's on the same page. And it sets a standard of conduct that promotes respect, responsibility, and humility. There's that word humility again, okay? And you're going to hear those 3 a lot. They are, those are major character traits that, we as individuals want to develop, and we want to get that across to our students, that's actually what they're developing by practicing this one concept in the peaceful solution. And continuing, it says, it reduces, here's some more benefits, right? It reduces misunderstandings, conflict, competition, and is non-threatening, okay? So takes away any threat of I'm trying to be over you or make you feel like I can do whatever I want. It's taking away that, and it's making people come to the same level of understanding. And I noted here, where I told you to highlight, I noted the workplace manual, this book, pages 12 and 13, okay, for the middle of that paragraph. And if we go back there real quick, 2 pages 12 and 13, you have the positive character traits, right? Okay, so that's just reference there that you have the positive character traits on pages 12 and 13 of the Workplace Manual. Continuing back on page 67, it says, a great rule of thumb is, when in doubt, just ask. Ask until someone says, you don't have to ask me anymore. And I underlined and starred that. Like, just, if you think it's just ridiculous and you've asked every day the same question, ask it every day. Ask it every day. And if your boss or your supervisor says, you don't have to ask me that anymore, you have my permission, and say, okay. I had that situation where, I was asking if I could go somewhere, and I was waiting. I was waiting for the answer sometimes. I wasn't asking too far in advance. And so then I'm sitting there waiting, and I really knew I had permission to go there, but I waited. And then one day, my supervisor said, you don't have to ask me to go there anymore. Just let me know you're there. And I said, oh, okay, that makes sense. So, sometimes we might have permission and we don't realize it. But wait until you have that permission, because you can't go wrong with that. Then your supervisor is aware of what you're doing. Then continuing here, it says, so ask until someone says you don't have to ask me anymore. Then you have permission not to ask. That is the only time, okay? That is the only time you get that permission. How can anyone argue with that rule? It's really simple, right? And that's really the bottom line of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. It's really simple. It's just training our minds to practice it, right? Because when we put this into practice, the author of this program said it will work, but we have to put it into practice. And I also made a note here, if something in the situation changes, okay, so we have permission to do something, right, or go somewhere or what have you. And if something in the situation changes, you can't just keep doing it, okay? If the situation changes, you need to go back to asking, okay? So if there's any change at all, then, I need to go back and make sure it's still okay for me to do whatever I was doing. And you might be given the same authority, but you might not. This is why it's important to ask and make sure, if there's a change. Because sometimes things do change. And why should we be consistent in asking? Everyone benefits, okay? Everyone benefits from asking in the workplace, and and not just in the workplace, but we'll take it home with us, all right? You can tell your students they will take this home with them, and they'll be interacting that way with their children and with their wives and their husbands. They will be doing this, okay? And that will improve their overall life. So I want you to highlight here the next few sentences, okay? I'll tell you when to stop. Consistency implies repeatedly asking permission. Consistency in positive moral conduct builds positive character traits. Consistency in asking permission shows respect, helps avoid conflicts, and builds positive interactions. Okay, that's a mouthful. Okay, now that's the key word though, right? Consistency. And we have talked about that many times before, even just in the last book that we covered, the parenting manual. It was in there, and I'm sorry I didn't note the page, but if one of y'all wants to give me that reference after class or next time, that would be great. And we'll make a note of it. But that consistency is the key, because if I asked, every day out of the week but one, well, that one day might not go so great, right? It might not be the very best day, and I'll be wondering, why didn't today go so well? Well, and it would be that. Okay, that would be the factor. Consistency is very important when we're building positive character traits. And we're going to have days where we don't. I cannot tell you the number of times where I have failed to ask something. And you know what? It actually came in my brain to do it. And I said, oh, it's okay. I think I got it. And I ignored that little part of my brain that says, you should just ask about that. And then I find out, man, I should have asked, right? So it really is something to reinforce in our minds that, the consistency in practicing it is going to benefit us greatly. And continuing the paragraph here to finish it, it says, make it a practice to be consistent in asking permission for the betterment of your own personal growth and development and for the benefit of the work environment. So first and foremost, you as an individual are getting the benefits, okay? Even before your work environment is benefiting, because it's changing something within you as a person. So remember that this is, holding yourself accountable and being consistent is going to improve that so much. All right, and at the bottom of the page it says, when in doubt, just ask. Okay, I think we've hit that home. Okay, now what I did was I put a note, that's the end of procedure 4, and I put a note at the bottom of my page, below the page number. It says go back to page 62, procedure 5. So if we go back to page 62 now, if you have your books, and we're going to look at procedure 5. And this is a really great activity here, all right? When the Peaceful Solution puts activities in here, it's really encouraged to do them with your students to the fullest, right? Take your time with them because they are going to enjoy this and it's going to stick with them more. Examples always stick with people. I remember one of my children, whenever I was teaching them anything, they would always, I'd ask them, for an answer on something, and we were doing the Peaceful Solution, and they would answer me with an example. That is how their brain functioned. It functioned on examples. Like, I know how to do this. I don't know how to say it like that, but I can tell you this example. And I always thought that was so adorable that they did that, but at the same time, it was application. And application sometimes is the hardest thing for us because, a concept we can tell you, ask, but then how do we apply that, right? So here we're gonna jump into some application of asking and see why it's so critical. So procedure number 5 says, allot time for students to read and then answer the questions for scenarios A through F, pages 68 through 73. Have students experience similar situations in their work environments? Discuss as a class, and I highlighted that because as the teacher, you're going to want to get that interaction with those students, okay? That's very important to make the connection with the students. Now, for time's sake in this class, we are not going to do that, but we're going to cover the scenarios. But I want to emphasize that. That's why I highlight that in my book, because when you're out there teaching in these environments, you want to make sure you really have a great discussion with them and that they understand what you're trying to teach them. For greater interaction, allow volunteers to role play the scenarios, and that if the lessons are if it's kind of stiff in your office or wherever your class environment is, that's a great way to loosen everybody up so that they can just have a little bit of fun while they're learning and take a scenario and just act it out. Everybody likes that kind of stuff, whether they say they do or not. When they're doing it, everyone will enjoy it, and they will have it'll be in their memory better too. Because they'll remember when so-and-so did that part and did that part, when they, so that it will come back to their minds more readily. Okay, and I put a note here along. Okay, well, let's see. Yeah, that's for the next part. Okay, so having read what the activity is, you can see here below procedure 5, it's scenario A, scenario B, and then on the next page, C, D, E, and over to 64F. Now, those are all talking points, questions for you to ask the students once you've gone over this scenario. So we'll look at those briefly after we go over the scenario. So let's turn over to page 68, and I believe top of the page here, it says, putting it into practice. Read the following scenarios to explore the importance of asking in the workplace. Answer the questions after the scenario. And then it refers you back to those pages, okay? So we're going to have a little interaction here. We had a volunteer for scenario A. Can we put scenario A up there for everyone to see and have someone read that?
Scenario A. A truck makes a delivery to Company A. After the truck is unloaded, Harry, a new employee, is told to stock the shelves. After filling the normal shelves designated for that item, he realizes that there are still more items that need to be put away. In one of the back rooms, Harry sees some empty shelves and decides to put the remaining items there. It was hard work, but he finally got all the items on the shelves. Later that day, his supervisor says, "Who put that inventory on the shelves in the back room?" Harry answered, "I did. There was too much to fit on the warehouse shelves, so I put the rest in the back." "Who gave you permission to put those items there?" questioned Harry's supervisor. "You should have asked. I would have told you we were starting to use the second warehouse on the east side. Now you're going to have to pack up everything you put in that back room and take it over to the east warehouse where it belongs."
All right, so Harry made a lot of work for himself, didn't he? And it seemed like it was definitely a lot of work because it says he got pretty tired. I mean, to get all of that unloaded and put away just because he didn't ask a simple question. So why do you think here, these are the questions to ask the students, and we're not going to answer them, but we're just going to briefly go over what their answers could possibly be. And why do you think Harry didn't ask about what to do with the excess inventory? Well, number one, he made an assumption, right, as to where he thought it should go. He saw an open space and he put it there. Number two, he might not have wanted to ask. Okay, he might have said, "I don't need to ask," right? He's not in that habit because he would have had to take the time to go do it, but he was in the middle of unloading it and he didn't want to take that time, might be one reason. But really, you can teach your students that those are just excuses, really. And if we make excuses not to go and ask, then we're not building that positive character trait, okay? And we're not building trust between us and our employers. Okay, and the second question says, what were the consequences of Harry's actions? Well, he made himself look pretty irresponsible, right? And which affects his reputation. And he caused himself more work, a lot more work, and he had to take it to a whole nother place. And he dismissed the authority of his supervisor by not seeking that instruction or to be clear, which doesn't show humility. It's more like a lack of humility. And how do you think the supervisor felt about Harry's decisions? Well, I would be disappointed, right? And I think you probably would be too, because it was a simple thing he was working on, and it could have been just very easily taken care of without all the extra work and time lost, because now Harry's doing the work twice. Actually, he's got to load it up and then unload it again. So, it's a lot more work and a lot more time lost on his job. And that would not build trust between him and his supervisor either. Okay, so situations like this occur in countless businesses all around the world. Employees routinely assume they know what to do and neglect to ask for instructions or guidance. If Harry had taken the time to ask, he would have received the instruction necessary to do his job correctly the first time. So here's what the moral of this scenario is. Let's put that up there. Asking saves time and helps you do the job right the first time. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our second teacher. Please welcome Brittany.
Hello, everyone. How's everyone doing this evening? I hope you're having a wonderful week so far. We are going to continue on right where Jennifer left off on page 69 on scenario B. And I believe we do have a reader, so if you can go ahead and read scenario B. And for those who are watching online, you can follow along with us on your screen.
Sheila has been working at Little Hands Daycare for the past 2 months. She enjoys her duties and has grown to love the children. Amy is a 3-year-old girl who's recently started at Little Hands and is in the age group Sheila works with. On one particular day, an older woman who Sheila had never seen before came to pick Amy up. She identified herself as Amy's grandmother, Mrs. Paul. Sheila was hesitant at first, but when Amy saw the woman, the child smiled and walked directly to her. Sheila reasoned that it would be okay since Amy recognized Mrs. Paul. "Okay, Mrs. Paul," Sheila said. "Just sign her out here on the sheet." At 5 o'clock, Amy's mother came to pick her up at her usual time. "Where's my daughter?" she asked with concern in her voice. "I don't see her anywhere." Sheila's heart began to beat fast. Her grandmother, Mrs. Paul, came by earlier to pick her up. She stammered nervously. Her grandmother? She doesn't have permission to pick Amy up.
Thank you. All right, now really consider this scenario here. How often do you hear about a situation like this taking place, where someone claiming to be a family member of a child shows up to a daycare center or a school to pick up that child? And if you paid close attention to the details of this scenario, it says that when Amy's grandmother came to pick her up, the girl ran to her and smiled. The girl did not call her grandmother. She did not say, "Hey, Grandma, are we going to do this?" All she did was run to the woman and smile. And she took that as if, oh, well, she knows this woman. She's comfortable with this woman. And we're going to get into some questions, but I want you to really think about that. Put yourself in that situation, how common this is. But if you're overwhelmed and you're dealing in a daycare and you're a busy, and somebody shows up to pick up one child that can take off your hands for 1 minute, and you're like, oh, okay, somebody she knows, okay, out, you're gone, I wrote it down, I did my job, everything is done. And then imagine what this woman was feeling when her mother came to pick this girl up. And not only to find out, okay, so she says her grandmother, she doesn't have permission to pick her up. Okay, let's be honest. In society today, families are not always on the same page, and all family members do not get along, they do not agree, and they do not see eye to eye. So taking that into consideration, we don't know what this woman's life or family life is like. We don't know if this is the grandmother of her ex-husband, of her former husband, if her spouse was abusive, and now this woman just took this child back to a situation that this woman worked extremely hard to get her out of. All of this we don't know about somebody's background. So keep all of that in mind as we go into these questions. Question number 1 is, why do you think Sheila was hesitant to release Amy to Miss Paul? So really think about that, because at first she was hesitant about it, because nowhere on the permission form did it have this woman's name. Nowhere did it say that she was allowed to pick her up. Right, so she had that initial thought, and remember Jennifer mentioned that if you have that gut reaction or that thought that pops into your head, always follow your intuition, because it's something that you know in the back of your mind telling you what's right and what's wrong. All right, so why did she? One example is that it might include that she made an assumption. Hold on, I'm reading the wrong one. It says that she didn't know who Mrs. Paul was, and she didn't know that she had permission to pick her up. So that first initial reaction, she realized, okay, 1, I don't know this woman, and 2, it doesn't tell me anywhere on the permission slip form that she can pick this child up. So that's there, okay? First initial reaction, that was the right one. But she proceeded through, she overlooked that first initial thought, and she moved forward and released the child. Now question number 2, what do you think Sheila based her decision on? Okay, so really think about that. Put yourself in this woman's shoes. What do you think she based her decision on? And if we were, putting ourselves in Sheila's shoe, we would see that this girl, the little 3-year-old, was extremely comfortable with her. She was extremely comfortable with this woman. Her face lit up. She ran right up to her. So she felt confident in that one thing. She felt that she had gotten her facts. And remember, the Peaceful Solution is always talking about being educated. She felt that she had got the facts. She had released the child into a safe family guardian. That's what she had come to the assumption of. Question number 3. What should Sheila have done to ensure the safety of the child? Okay, so what are some things that she could do? One thing I personally would feel comfortable with a teacher or somebody doing is calling the number on the permission slip, whatever family member is on there, and say, hi, I have somebody by the name of Miss Paul, or I have somebody claiming to be Amy's grandmother. Did you give her permission to pick her up at this time? Because I know that you normally pick her up anytime it's on my shift. But this woman is saying that is that okay with you? Okay, so there's procedures to go through, but that's what I personally would feel comfortable with somebody doing with my child if I put them into your care. To find confirmation from me, because I dropped off my child and I put them in your care. Find that confirmation there. Right? Another thing they could do is on their form, ask, okay, so this situation occurred. Can you put a picture next to the person or the name of the person? Because if you give me a name, anybody could claim to be that person. Can you put a picture of the person that goes by this name, claiming to be her grandmother, so I know, okay, I can pull the file, permission slip, okay, Amy's grandmother, this is what she looks like, then it's okay. You go through all the steps, and it does take an extra 5 to 10 minutes, but when it comes to the safety of, one, your job and the safety of a child's life and not endangering them, it's worth the extra 5 to 10 minutes or the extra stress it might be causing us in that moment. Question number 4. What could be some of the consequences of Sheila's decision to release Amy to her grandmother? So really think about that. What are some consequences for her job? She could, 1, lose her job. 2, she would probably no longer be on that shift by herself. Somebody would always be there looking over, making sure, double checking before a child is released that somebody's double checked her work so that they make sure she's there. Another consequence is that that child could have been kidnapped, and that mother might have never seen that child again. And sadly to say, that is a very common situation that we see over the course of my lifetime. Even in my area here in Abilene, Texas, I've seen many situations of misinformation, and children get kidnapped and they're never seen again by their family members. Okay, so all of these things are consequences that could come into place. So the child's safety, the mother might lose trust and faith in that facility itself to drop her child off. And if she spreads that to other mothers, that it's not safe to drop your child off because this is what occurs, that place could go out of business because no one is feeling safe and that trust isn't there. So, we talked a lot about in the previous chapters of how our actions affect other people. That could shut down an entire company because of our choices. And giving Sheila the benefit of the doubt, she did think she did the right thing. She did. She felt like she followed every protocol, every procedure. But that's why it's so important that we remember what we've learned, we constantly go over our thoughts, and we follow our intuition or, something that comes into our mind that says, this doesn't feel right. Go to a supervisor, go to somebody over you to double check, to make sure you're making the right decisions. Okay, the bottom of page 69. It says, when faced with a dilemma as to the right course of action, it is always best to ask for guidance and instruction. As in the above scenario, asking would have kept the child safe and avoided the consequences of mother and child being separated, and Sheila possibly losing her position of employment or criminal charges being filed against her for negligence. Okay, and those are all of the consequences that could come from this. And I have this underlined in my book, that first sentence, where it says it is always best to ask for guidance and instruction. And remember, we just read that on the previous page. When in doubt, just ask. Always ask. Never be afraid to ask. If you ask a million questions and you feel like a 2-year-old, that's okay, because but for the next time, and those around you know what the answer is in case they ever have that question in the future. Okay, and the quote at the bottom of page 69 says, asking can keep you safe and guard against danger. Asking can keep you safe and guard you against danger. And asking is one of those things that's become something of an annoyance in our society today. And I've heard a saying, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission, because I can go back and I can ask you forgiveness, and that's a lot easier than asking your permission. But in reality, forgiveness takes years to get back, and forgiveness, and then to rebuild that trust. So that saying or that quote isn't quite as factual as we are led to believe and just tossing it out there when we don't really want to ask for something. All right, going on to page 70, we're going to go into scenario C. So I can have scenario C reader, please.
Two women work for a local bank. The policy for break time is to wait until there are very few customers and then ask permission before going on break. Maureen says to Kathleen, I'm going to take my break. There aren't too many customers. You can handle it. Kathleen responds, fine, but don't forget to check with the supervisor first. Maureen replies, she's always tied up on the phone. By the time she is available, I could already take my break and be back. Maureen walks out the door. As soon as Maureen leaves, several people enter the bank at once. Kathleen is overwhelmed and has no other recourse but to call the supervisor for help. Why are you calling me for help? Where is Maureen? Asks the supervisor in a bewildered tone. Kathleen responds, She went on break. She did what? Explains the supervisor. By whose permission? This is the first of the month. People come into the bank at this time to get their checks cashed. If she had asked me, I would have told her this is a bad time for a break. Please send her immediately to my office when she returns.
Thank you. And we're going to go into question number 1 to get our thoughts going here. And it says, why do you think Kathleen didn't ask her supervisor before taking her break as the policy stated? Okay, so put yourself in Kathleen's shoes here. Why do you think she didn't ask permission? She already had this idea that her supervisor's always busy on the phone. It's not like she'd take the time to listen to her anyways, and she was going to take her break. I could be on my break 15 minutes out and back before the supervisor ever even notices. She's off her phone. She's always doing whatever she wants to do. I don't understand why I can't do it too. That's the kind of vibe and the attitude that you get from Kathleen here. Okay, but if you remember the situation, this is her supervisor. We don't know what's going on in other people's lives. We don't know what's going on in other people's minds. We might not realize if we're so focused on the fact that our supervisor, like Kathleen says here, is always on her phone, not realizing your supervisor's on the phone doing work. You're wanting to go to your break. That's nothing that has to do with work. So the fact that your supervisor might want to finish the work situation before she has a moment that she can answer you to go to your break, that's something to take into consideration. And it's one thing that it goes back to that empathy and that compassion and that understanding and that respect, because whenever we really, really want something, especially, when we're not in a supervising position or you've never been in a supervising position, it can be easy to overlook the fact of, they're never listening to me, or if I was a supervisor, I would give them half a minute. I would give them this. I would give them that. But if you're not in that situation and you're not in that amount of stress and that amount of things that are going on, and you have 20 things that have to be done at the exact same time for 10 different people and 20 different locations, you don't know the mindset of that person. And so when Kathleen is here, why do you think she didn't ask her supervisor? Because she didn't feel her supervisor was valid. Like, she didn't think that she deserved that respect. And really, really think about and break down that mindset, because we're really talking about that a lot going through this unit. That yes, we want to show empathy, we want to show respect, but why do we feel that this behavior is acceptable? Why did Kathleen feel that this behavior was acceptable? Why did she think that overlooking her supervisor wasn't that big a deal? It goes back to that mindset. Somewhere in her mind, she didn't feel that the supervisor deserved that respect, or she thought the rules were stupid. She didn't think that that policy mattered as much as something else. And it's a mindset that we really want to, as you're teaching this and as you're going through this course, to really question everything when you say something, when you react a certain way, when you're in, your work situations. Okay, if I'm feeling this way, what causes me to feel this way? When I went on my break, did I call my friend and complain about my supervisor? And if my friend validates my feelings, then I feel like, oh, well, I'm fine feeling this way. There's nothing wrong with it because my friend's got my back. She feels the same way. And sometimes whenever we surround ourselves, remember, the Peaceful Solution talks a lot about our environment, making up our mindset. Our environment builds our character. It shapes who we are. And if we're repeating these things, Kathleen went on break, she called her friend complaining about the situation, complaining about her supervisor. She might have complained about her coworker who reminded her to make sure she asked the supervisor. She thought I was stupid and I didn't even know the policies. I'm not keeping the policies, I'm not keeping the rules, but I felt annoyed because somebody reminded me of it. And it goes back to the thought process, their environment, the people that we're spending our time with, true friendships and relationships. All of this ties into building moral excellence in the workplace. All right, question number 2. What could be the consequences of her actions? So what could be the consequence of Kathleen taking her break and then they're swamped and the supervisor comes out to see why there's so many people here when she knows full well she put enough hands out in the front to make sure everything was taken care of? Why is she seeing all of this go on? Because she knows the supervisor, she knows full well she did her job. But when she's looking out, things are not going according to plan. And that's where it goes back to that teamwork. If you give an instruction or if there's a policy, it's in place for a reason. And once you're a supervisor or you see when it's broken, how it affects us, we have that respect and we have that understanding as to why that rule was put into place. Right, it says Kathleen could cause stress for her coworkers and her supervisor. She could have had a report written up about her conduct, and she could even lose her job. If it's something that she does repeatedly or something that she's known for and it becomes a part of her reputation, she could lose her job. She could also be known as the person that, you know when you get shift changes and you rotate through the shift? She'd probably be the coworker that nobody wanted to pull a shift with because you wouldn't know that she was going to have your back. And if you've seen her and then she wasn't there, you'd probably have somebody go track her to find her. Because when it gets busy and you know in 15 minutes it's going to get busy, you're going to want to know where she is so that you can make sure she's back when it's time for that. So she's probably going to get annoyed with those who work with her, and then it creates that distress in the workplace to where you're not someone that somebody wants to work with, simply because of our behavior and the way we choose to do things. Let's see, question number 3. How do you think Kathleen's supervisor felt about her actions? Okay, so we went through, her taking her break, the consequences of her actions, but what do you think her supervisor felt? Someone who's there every single day, someone who's all she's doing is enforcing policies. She's not making it hard for people, she's not overbearing, she's simply enforcing policies. And it says that her supervisor is likely probably very annoyed and also disappointed. Because when you have people under you, you expect them to uphold, what you ask them to do, to uphold those, those policies and those standards and those boundaries that they set for themselves. All right. At the bottom, at the bottom of page 70, it says, when you take the time to ask, it shows respect for authority and for the rules and the policies in your area. Respect is to show care, concern, and honor to others, the rules, inanimate objects, and the environment. And if you want to underline that sentence, that is the definition for respect in this book. Okay, to show care, concern, honor to others, the rules, inanimate objects, and the environment. If Maureen had taken the time to ask her supervisor for permission to take a break, she would have shown respect for the one in authority and for the rules and the policies. Her choice caused undue stress on her coworker and supervisor who had to leave her duties to assist Kathleen. By exercising patience and self-control, Maureen could have made the respectful choice to ask permission before going to her break. And you can see how it created an entire situation, an entire discussion. And if you've ever worked in a workplace where if you're there with somebody 8 to 10 hours a day, you usually either build a friendship or you build some kind of relationship while you're at work. And really imagine these two women who work together 8 to 10 hours a day. They're there. This woman has a reputation of doing this. Her coworker is on her last straw. She is finished. She's not dealing with it anymore. She's done it again. The situation blows up. These two people are arguing. The supervisor's coming back out, trying to see what's going on. They just created an entire situation, and no work is being done. And usually when people are in a stressful situation and they feel overwhelmed, words are said that are very hurtful, and they can't be taken back. And then they're implanted in the mind of the person they were said to. And even if you apologize, and even if you say, oh, I didn't mean it, I was just angry, I was just frustrated, my mouth spouts off sometimes, the seed is already planted. And now every time they're in that situation, they always wonder if that's what you're really thinking. All right, the bottom of page 70, they give us a quote here that says, asking shows respect for authority, the rules, and policies. Okay, so asking, it shows respect for the authority, for the rules, and for the policies. So we're going to go over to page 71, and if I could have reader for scenario D. Page 71, scenario D.
Scenario D. Patricia works as a secretary in Mr. Montgomery's real estate agency. It is Patricia's responsibility to verify that Mr. Montgomery is ready before bringing appointments into his office. Normally, Patricia uses the intercom to ask him if she can send in the next appointment. Today, however, Patricia has double the volume of calls and was preoccupied with taking messages, scheduling appointments, checking on the status of applications. When Mr. Montgomery, the 9:30 appointment arrives, Patricia ushers him into her boss's office and opens the door without asking if he was ready. Just as she opens the door, Mr. Montgomery takes a big bite of his breakfast sandwich. His mouth is full and he can barely speak. With a startled expression, he motions the client to come in. Oh, I'm sorry, Patricia says as she tried to get out the door. In her haste, Patricia steps on the foot of the client and then turns around and bumps into him. "Oh, I'm sorry," says Patricia once again. "Maybe you should have taken today off," responded the client as he limped into the office.
Thank you. All right, and that's kind of a comical scenario, but if you're clumsy like me, it is also a very realistic scenario that you could find yourself in. And it would be very embarrassing, it would be very uncomfortable, and then you have to go back to sit at the desk when the person comes back out. So you get to be re-embarrassed. But let's go into the questions here for Patricia. And it says, what was the policy regarding Mr. Montgomery's appointments? And remember, the policy was you always ask him first or intercom him in to see if it's okay, your appointment for so-and-so at this time is here. Are you able to take them in, or do I need to have them wait a few minutes? Okay, and for most times, at least whenever I go somewhere, I always have to wait. And I always have a joke that my patience is not, that it's very small, and that's why whenever I go somewhere, I always have to wait, because it's teaching me patience. So it's very likely that first thing in the morning, you're most likely going to have to wait when you walk into an office to get an appointment. So more than likely, they would be very understanding of the fact that I'm your first appointment of the day. I expect to wait while you get things situated. That's totally fine. And that was the policy here, to always check in with them. But remember, she was stressed. She had so much going on that morning. She might have been late. Like the client said, maybe you shouldn't have came off today. Maybe you should have taken today off. Obviously, she gave off that look. She was frazzled. She might have been discombobulated a little bit. She might have had everything on her desk, everything going on, not sorted, or she didn't have something the day before or the whole day. We don't know what's going through her mind. But you can tell that she had a lot on her mind, that she overlooked this one policy that ended up very much embarrassing her and being a lasting impression if that client ever comes back, I'm very sure. Question number 2. Why did Patricia fail to ask her boss's permission to bring in his appointment? And again, that's because she was very busy and she neglected that one thing. And for me, if I get overwhelmed and frazzled, just something about me that might work for you, I have to write down points. And numbers don't work for me, so I have stars. I put stars by everything. Okay, so this needs to go, then this, then that, so I can organize it in my brain. And if I cannot see it in my brain, it is going to be a mess. And when somebody gives you a whole pile of things to do, if I see the pile, I can't even start. I have to break it down into itemized, okay, so this needs to go first, then this needs to go, then that needs to go, and then that needs to go. And I have to order it. So again, you yourself, if you've ever found yourself in a situation like Patricia's, find what works for you. If you get overwhelmed easily, if you find that you overlook policies, you overlook procedures, find a way to note them for you that gets them into your mind so that you don't find yourself in an embarrassing situation. Number 3, what were the consequences of Patricia's actions? Okay, one is that she embarrassed her boss, she embarrassed herself, because the first person you see represents the company, and the first person you see represents the boss. And if the first person they see is like this, they might not trust the boss so much with handling, especially, if it's a lawyer, if it's handing, let's see, this was a real estate agency. So you might not trust them in dealing your paperwork properly. If they can't keep their house in order, how can they keep your files in order? That's something that could have been a consequence there, again, affecting the company. Question number 4. How do you think Patricia's boss felt about her actions? Okay, again, he might have felt very embarrassed. He could have realized that either one, she was overwhelmed and maybe he should cut back on the amount of load that he gives her first thing in the morning, or he probably recognized that here, he could have seen that she didn't respect the policies that he put into place. And remember, he was just embarrassed himself. So if the boss does not have self-control, and if the boss does not have respect, then her day was very long, and it was probably not very enjoyable. Because that's going to lash out, and that embarrassment reflects into anger, and then it could turn out into words again being spouted out. All right, going into question number 5. How do you think the client felt? Okay, the client is the one who got stepped on. How do you think the client felt in that situation? One, they were probably embarrassed, highly annoyed by the situation, and then you walk into into the meeting here. Again, annoyed, embarrassed, and slightly overwhelmed there. All right, and question number 6, how do you think Patricia felt? Okay, so how do you think Patricia felt? One, to start off the morning, she was overwhelmed. She felt that she had so much going on. Then the situation occurs, and then she has to go back out, face any coworkers that she has. She has to face the client when he comes out, and then she has to go back in when her boss more than likely calls her back into his office, and then she has to answer for what she did and explain the embarrassing situation, or she might get a tongue lashing as to why, why did this occur? Like, this isn't what my company represents. You just made a fool out of all of us. You don't know how that situation might have went. All right, the bottom of page 71 says, taking the time to ask permission can help us avoid embarrassing situations. In the above scenario, Patricia failed to follow the policy of asking before taking new clients to the office and caused her boss, herself, and even the new client to feel embarrassed and uncomfortable. Taking the time to ask can avoid awkward situations and the consequences that follows. And I would underline that last sentence there on that page. Taking the time to ask can avoid awkward situations and the consequences that follows. So again, it's very easy and simple to say, if you don't want a consequence, if you don't want to be embarrassed, if you don't want to feel uncomfortable, simply ask. But when you're in that situation and you have all these emotions and you're overwhelmed and you have everyone else that's countering into the decision that you make, it's not always so black and white. That's why it goes back to, I think we covered it in the beginning of today's class, it goes back to that VIP, to value, to imitate, and to practice, okay? This might be embarrassing. Patricia could have thrown her hands up and said, I'm never coming to work today because I'm obviously terrible at my job. She had one bad situation. She's obviously terrible at her job. She's never coming back. She's done. Or she can value the fact that this was a lesson to be learned. There was something to learn from this. And somebody shared with me not too long ago, they said, you never have a bad day. You have a bad moment. I've heard that before, right? But when she shared it with me, she said, you don't have a bad moment because every bad moment you learn something from. It's only a bad moment if you didn't learn anything from it. So even if it's the most embarrassing thing in your life, it's the worst decision you ever made, it's the biggest thing that maybe went all over social media and you think your life can't come back from, if you learn something from it, it's not a bad situation. It's something that occurred in your life, you learned something from it, how do I get back from that? How do I move forward? Not staying in what brought us down, but seeing how to, again, value, imitate, practice, get back on the right track. And we're going to leave off with the quote on the bottom of page 71 that says, asking can avoid embarrassing situations. All right, and emphasize to your students when you're teaching this that you cannot ever let your guard down. The moment you let your guard down and you're not aware of your thoughts, you're not aware of your feelings, you're not aware of the way our actions affect other people, that's when you've ended up in a bad situation, okay? Or again, not a bad situation, you have a hard moment. That's what we'll call it, a hard moment. All right, so we're going to end there. In next class, we're going to pick up on page 72, scenario E. So if you want to put that in, mark that, page 72, scenario E. I hope everyone has a wonderful week, and we'll see you back here next Tuesday, 5:30. Bye, everyone.